Hey everybody, welcome back to The Left Lane, and welcome back to my 2023 Triumph Trident 660. Now, I've had this bike for about 18 months, and as of right now, it is unmodified with the exception of a tail pack, a Triumph-specific tank pad, and a quad lock. Now, since I have owned this bike for about 18 months, I wanted to use today's video to tell you 5 things I love, and 5 things that I don't love as much about this bike. Now, before we really get into the meat of this video, I want to give you just a little bit of information on how I really use this motorcycle, so that you can look at this review through that lens. Now, this bike really has 2 uses for me. About 50% of the time, it gets used as a commuter for about a 2 or 3 mile ride to my work. The rest of the time, it's just a weekend toy, something fun to take up into the mountains, and just have fun with. With that disclaimer out of the way, let's go ahead and jump right into the first thing that I really do love about this bike, and that would be the way that it looks. Now, motorcycling is always going to be a little bit of an exercise in vanity, so the way that your bike looks matters, and I think that the Trident 660 really nails it. This is a very handsome motorcycle, and I think especially in this orange. And although I wasn't initially a huge fan of the matte paintwork, I've actually really come to love it. I think that it accentuates the curves of the bike and really gives it a unique flavor. The second thing that I really love about the Trident is its engine. The 660cc inline triple may only produce about 81 horsepower and 47 pound-feet of torque, but truthfully, that is more than enough to cruise comfortably on the highway at 80 miles an hour, or to propel you to truly excessive speeds on a back road. More importantly to me though, this engine truly has character. It combines the low-down grunt of a twin with the screaming 10,000 RPM top end of a 4-cylinder. On top of that, it also has that characteristic triple whistle layered over a deeper bass thrum, even with the stock exhaust. To me, this power plant has everything that I want. Namely, plenty of usable power, and just a little bit of drama that keeps even my daily commute feeling fun. Entering the twistier section of this ride allows me to segue nicely into the third thing that really makes the Trident special. As I'm sure you've heard just about every motorcycle journalist say, the suspension on this bike is excellent. No, it's not adjustable, and no, it's not super premium like an Öhlins setup. But it is very well set up right out of the factory. The WP shocks do an excellent job of soaking up our bumpy Colorado roads, while also allowing you to really lean on them in corners. And I'll fully admit that I do not ride this bike up to anywhere near its full potential, but I do know some guys who I ride with who really hammer on these things and love them as a street performance and light track duty bike. Fourth, and a real bright point for this bike, is the gauge cluster. Put simply, this thing rocks. It's simple, visually attractive, intuitive, and has plenty of information available at your fingertips. I love that it keeps the appearance of a classic single clock design while also incorporating a TFT display, and it's also highly legible even under direct sunlight thanks to the high contrast white on black design. Finally, the seating position and general ergonomics for the Trident are excellent. It's generally quite a comfortable motorcycle, with the notable exception of the seat, but I'll get to that a little bit later. Although this is not a bike that encourages you to enter a tuck, your body position still feels secure and quite sporty. However, it's also relaxed enough not to cramp your legs and arms, and to save your back. So, with the high points of the Trident out of the way, let's move on to a few of the things that I'm just not as big a fan of. And to start off with, let's talk about that seat. Now, the seat isn't bad if you're just commuting, if you're doing a couple miles, if you're doing maybe less than an hour in the saddle. But truthfully, you spend any more time than that, and it is going to start to hurt. It's not a well-padded seat, and I think that if I keep this bike longer term, I will end up putting in an aftermarket seat with a little bit more padding. My second gripe, and it is admittedly quite a minor one, is with the handlebar. You can probably see that my quad lock phone mount is partially blocking the gauge cluster, and that's because there is not a good place to secure that quad lock anywhere else except for right next to the center of the handlebar. And yes, that is a very minor annoyance, but it's also one of the things that you realize once you live with the bike for a while. And although it's not a deal breaker, it is something that I wish was just a little bit different. The third and probably biggest issue for me is the brakes. Now, in my last video, my first review of this bike, I had reported that I didn't really feel the same issues that other testers had reported, but now that I've had a chance to live with it for a while, now that I'm more comfortable pushing the bike and going faster, I am starting to see the issues. Namely, those come in the form of brake fade, because once you've been on the brakes for a little while, even if it's just sort of going down a mountain pass normally, you do start to feel fade. You start to lose a little bit of the feeling from the brakes, and you start having to grab a larger handful of them to get it to do anything, which is not a fantastic feeling when you're used to a particular biting point. Now, to be fair to the Trident, this probably isn't an issue that's going to affect you under most of the conditions that you're going to be riding in. For city riding, for highway riding, you're probably going to be just fine. I really only notice the brake fade when I am on a twistier road like this, and when I am pushing a little bit harder. Still, this is something that you might expect to be just a little bit better from a stock braking setup, especially from a brand like Triumph, and it is one of the more major annoyances for me with the Trident. My fourth gripe is less a flaw with the Trident and more so a flaw with this general style of bike, and really just something to be aware of when you are selecting something. Now, if speed is your outright goal, a naked bike may not be your best choice, because the wind resistance, especially at higher speeds, on the Trident this really starts at about 65 to 70 miles an hour, that wind resistance can be pretty brutal, and it does try to rip you right off the back of this bike. Now, whether or not this is going to bother you is really going to depend on your use case for the Trident. For me, it really doesn't bother me at all. I use the bike mostly on city streets or up in the mountains where I'm really going a maximum of about 70 miles an hour. So below that speed, the wind resistance doesn't bother me really at all. Now, if you were going to use this as a regular highway commuter, something that you're doing long miles on the highway on, that's when I would start to have second thoughts, or at the very least consider getting a windscreen attached. My fifth and final gripe with the Trident is again a pretty minor one. In general, this transmission is crisp and easy to use, but I will say that on occasion, you do have to be rolling forward slightly to get it to go into first gear. Now, for the most part, this isn't an issue, but if you do happen to put it in neutral while at a stoplight, and you are facing up a hill, it can be difficult to get it going again. The solution for this, of course, is just not to put it in neutral and tough out holding the clutch for a minute while you're at the light. So, after just about 19 months of ownership on the Trident 660, What are my overall thoughts? Do I regret buying this bike? Do I wish I had bought something else? Well, as you can probably tell from the fact that most of my complaints were pretty minor, I love this bike. I love the way it looks, I love the way it rides, I like the way it makes me feel when I ride it. This is a wonderful motorcycle, and no, of course, I do not regret buying it. My one piece of advice would be not to do what I did when I actually bought the Trident. Now, when I bought the bike, I had just graduated from college, and I had very little money, so I really ended up only putting down about $1,500 towards the purchase of the Trident. And that means that I have a lot of money financed on this bike that is now tied up, and that gives me a pretty large monthly payment. Now, I can highly recommend the Trident, but I would say make sure that you can either pay for it completely in cash or at least put down enough that you're not going to be underwater on your loan. Because although this is a wonderful bike, it is more beginner oriented and it doesn't hold its value as well. I'm seeing comparable used examples selling for about $6,500 in my area, which means that I am still underwater on my loan after about 18 months. So again, I highly recommend the Trident, but I also highly recommend being in a slightly better financial situation if you are interested in buying. And with that, I think we are just about ready to wrap this video up. I hope that you enjoyed coming along with me on this lovely early summer ride in Colorado, and I hope that you also enjoyed getting just a little window into the ownership of this bike. As you can probably tell, there are a whole lot of things to like, and just a few minor gripes that you should be aware of as you're considering, so if you are interested in the Trident, if you're interested in buying one, have any questions, feel free to drop them down in the comments below, and I will answer them as soon as I can. Again, hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.